Welcome, everyone. Ms. Holmley, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
All right, well, the Richland County official timepiece on the computer says 4 p.m. So if you would please take the roll, I'll call the meeting to order, please.
Malinowski,
Here.
Kennedy, and Ms. Newton.
I see you're there.
Yep.
Hello?
Hey, Paul, we just took a roll. And Kennedy,
All right.
Kennedy is not here, correct?
No, sir, she's not here.
Okay. First item on the sheet is the adoption of the agenda. I lip read you, Miss Newton. It looked like you said so moved, but I can't hear anything.
I did. I was muted. So Miss Only, apparently I was also muted when I said that I was present, but hopefully you took my presence as present. Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. I'll second it. I would like to move one thing, though. I'd like to move letter E, the proposed CMRTA board member qualifications, to the top so that we can get that done. And then the council can act on it when they need to, since they've got at least one position that is up for renewal. And that way we can have that done on their behalf, if that's all right with you. That would be my
Mr. Chair, I would move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Okay. Second, any other discussion? If not, Ms. Only.
Sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Kennedy, Newton.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, we have on page, it says 96 through 100 are the proposed board member qualifications. Page 96 is actually where the criteria is what I'd kind of prefer to use, but that's all right. That's how it came here. I think Chairman Livingston provided some of this or received this and then provided it to us. I don't know if you've had a chance to read through this, Ms. Newton, if there's any suggestions you may have for changes, accepting it as it is. I've got a couple notes here.
Mr. Chair, I guess it says that the individual should have experience or interest in transportation. That is in the last subset of qualities. Qualities experience suggested to serve on the board. And I guess that I would ask them, I certainly think that we want someone with an interest in transportation. Outside of having participated in the Comet Leadership Academy, it seems like we would also want someone who is familiar with the Comet, not necessarily the ins and outs of operations, but that they had familiarity with our specific transit board, I think would be a desired quality.
Okay, why don't we add that one as another bullet point under where it says participate in the Comet Leadership Academy. Let's add, what wording did you want then? Familiar with the Comet system?
Sure.
Okay. I had my first question goes up to under the section that says qualifications suggested to serve on the board. The third bullet point, it says have a fiduciary responsibility to vote for the best interests of the region and not those of their appointment body. I'd like to see that worded a little differently because it's the appointment body or bodies that are providing all of the funding or the majority of the funding. I realize they get grants for this particular entity. So I think that there needs to be a fiduciary responsibility to the appointment body as well, to make sure that the monies provided are being handled properly.
So, Mr. Malinowski, to
Yes.
your question or your concern here, is it that you would want to see them vote with both in mind? Because I guess the way that I interpret this is that you wouldn't want to do something that was good for one part of the comment, but taint the whole system for everybody. So
Exactly. And so that's why I'd like to kind of add, sort of combine it and have a one sentence that covers both, have a fiduciary responsibility to vote for the best interest of the region. I think that would, of the region as well as the appointment body.
I would be fine with that suggestion.
Okay.
And I
Ms.
would
Brown,
imagine
that's
that it's
exactly
in
what I was
keeping-
about to suggest, just to tie it together like that, as opposed to just putting a negative in there and not those.
Okay, so Ms. Only, if you get that, then we're going to, on that bullet point, have a fiduciary responsibility to vote for the best interest of the region as well as the appointment body. Is everyone all right with that? Okay. And then on the last bullet point of that same section, it says, are responsible for keeping their respective jurisdictions informed of key issues. And it goes on. I think keeping their respective jurisdictions and the appointing body informed of key issues. Because you can go to a local town hall meeting and tell them what's going on, but the council or your other municipality body has no idea what's going on. So I would like to add those three words, that you are responsible for keeping their respective jurisdictions and the appointment body informed of key issues and the rest of it. Is that one all right?
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I'm sure that's keeping with the intent that they had.
right. I think it is. And then on the one where you mentioned, Ms. Newton, for participated in the Comet Leadership Academy. I've got some questions on that because I do not know really how often this academy is offered, how long it takes. I don't know if it's hours or days or what. I don't know where it's given or how it's advertised. And I think we need those questions answered before we tell somebody they must participate in this. Paul, do you know, or maybe Ms. Newton?
No, but I was,
Well,
Ms. Newton, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I inquired about this just recently and got a response just to say, when is the next academy and what do you cover? But I haven't had a chance to look at it. I think that one way to address it might be similar to the way job descriptions work, where there are requirements that you have to have, and then there are things that are preferred. So I guess when I read this, I interpreted it as a preferred, as I don't know that anyone's ever mentioned that they participated in the academy, So would you feel comfortable saying participation in the Comet Leadership Academy preferred, which removes it from being mandatory?
Well, each one of these, if you look at the opening line above the bullets, it said qualifications suggested to serve on the board. And then
Okay, so these are already preferred.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think they need to spell that out somewhere. So if somebody's going and you say, well, refer to the criteria that are on the website. When they go to that, they need to know the answers to this Comet Leadership Academy. I don't know them myself. Paul, do you have any input there?
no, I'm not sure about it either.
Mr. Brown, do you? No. Okay.
I know that they're trying to have one more this year, just because I inquired when I saw this on the list.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But I wonder, this whole heading, qualities, experiences suggested to serve on board.
Right.
If again, that could be preferred
Okay,
or
so-
some other language.
Well, why don't we put preferred instead of suggested? Qualities / experience preferred to serve on board?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or we could put preferred first, preferred
Yeah,
qualities and
I actually
experiences
like
to
the
serve on
preferred
board.
at the beginning, yeah. And the same with the top
Yes.
one, preferred qualifications to serve on the board. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. Then let's do that. And with those changes, any other conversation on this? If not, Miss Only, you have all those written down, or I guess you can listen to the tape, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I do have one other question or comment to make here, and that is where they have on page 97. They have given us, and mine was cut off, I'm thinking, because it says profile of the comment board of, I'm guessing that was directors, because the percentages that they provide on the last page are not correct with the amount of people that I have on only this page. So I'd like to get that other page in here. There's obviously more people than what it's showing here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There are only 6 people being shown on page 97. But for example, the very first one on the last page, on page 100, it says 90% are over the age of 50. Well, when you're looking at those 6 people, 100% are over the age of 50. So there must be somebody else in there that we're not being able to pick up. So if we could just get that put in the next agenda and or with the council agenda when this gets to the council. So with that addition and with those changes, I would accept a motion on this matter.
Mr. Chair, I move to refer the updated qualifications to council.
And I will second that. Any additional discussion? If not, Ms. Only, if you'll call for the vote, please.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Kennedy, Newton,
Yes.
it passes.
Okay, that takes care of that one. Thank you. The next one, we can continue moving forward. I know we've got the title only, but I think that's kind of going to hinge on the rules, as is the Horizon meeting going to hinge on the rules. And the last meeting we ended, I made a note here with 1.7 of our rules. And that's where our discussion ended, when we ran out of time. So picking up on 1.7, that had to do with the agenda. And I think we need to just make a note that we have to wait on that particular portion until it's finally resolved what we're going to be doing with the Horizon meeting. So I think for now, let's leave it, and let's just come back to that before we provide our final rules to council. And I'll just make a note that 1.7 needs to be revisited, unless there's some other comments.
Well, I do just have some other comments. If we're speaking to item 1.7 as a whole,
Yeah.
which is just, I just have a question that isn't really affected by Horizon, and that is item 1.7, the proposed new rules for administrator nomination. I had a question about that. Is that something that you'd rather hold as part of the overall conversation, or discuss it now?
No, the only thing was the agenda being held based on what's determined for Horizon. Everything else is fair game moving through, I think. So
Okay.
Go ahead with your question.
So then when it comes to item 1.77, there's a proposed new rule for the administrator's nomination of things to get on the agenda. And I recognize that there have been some times when there have been time-sensitive items that we need to discuss. I guess my only question, and it looks like we have legal on the line, is 1.7C says that any nomination or addition would have to meet the notice requirements of the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. And I guess as a practical matter, I was wondering, how would we do that if we can't notice it beforehand because this is something that is coming up last minute. So is item 1.77C just saying where possible in advance, we're going to notify people, and that doing it at the meeting is consistent with FOIA, or is there some other suggestion there? I don't know if my question is clear, Mr. Farah.
Yeah, so the FOIA only requires 24 hours notice. Y'all's rules, and when you get your agenda out, it's longer period than that, but the FOIA only requires the 24-hour notice. If you had things that came up at the meeting, you would have to still meet that kind of emergency situation that council would have to add with, I want to say it's probably a supermajority. Not sure if that's a 2/3, but I can find out.
Mr. Farrell, right below
Okay.
it, in D, you have must be consented by 2/3.
Yeah, so, yeah, I must have printed off the wrong agenda item because I don't have that language in front. I remember drafting it, but I don't have that language in front of me. So it's 1.77.
Well, I will say, I'm looking at, because this has come before so many times, I have my notes actually written on the May 19th agenda. So it may not correspond to the July 21.
Mine are in the June 2nd one, and they're corresponding with yours.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking about. I need to get the right version, but I know the language you're talking about.
Well, before
Okay,
you,
and I will also look.
okay, before you do that, I would offer that as far as my preferences would be not to add this proposed new rule, because I believe this would allow the potential for circumvention of our committee vetting that we have right now. We've seen that occur when people have wanted to add things to the agenda last minute. It could create a lot of debate and extend the overall meeting because of that entities and residents alike of the county, I think they could see this up as an opportunity to get something on the agenda last minute, not going through the proper procedures. Now, I'm not using that to cast any barbs at our current administrator, Mr. Brown. This is only as good as the administrator wants it to be. But it is, to me, a loophole to get something on an agenda bypassing the process that we have in place right now. If it's that much of an emergency, a council member could bring it forward and ask for that 2/3 vote to add to the agenda, like we're going to do tonight with what was discussed in the Employee Evaluation Committee, and you're going to ask for majority consent to add an item to the agenda. We need to, as a county, I think, stop allowing outside agencies to try to control what we're doing. And by that, I mean, we hear too many times that, and legal's one of those where it comes from, it's, well, we didn't get that information prior to just before the meeting or until Monday. Well, guess what, folks? Maybe if you start realizing that we have a process to follow and you don't take precedence over that process, they'll start getting us that information, because a lot of the information that we're given is information that could have been received prior to that point in time. So for those reasons, I would not support the proposed new rule.
Mr. Malinowski.
Oh,
Let Ms. Newton and then you, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you.
well, actually, I noticed now that I've expanded my screen, Mr. Livingston had his hand raised, so I'm happy to
Oh,
defer.
you're right. You're right. I failed to look over there. Go ahead, Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Malinowski, my concern is the administrator may be aware of something that's brought to his attention that a council member may not be aware of, and he may better understand the impact that has on the county as a whole. And I don't want to, I'm concerned like you, as you are about, it being misused, but at the same time, I don't want to tie our hands to the point where we can't deal with something that's crucial that might make a big difference to the county. And that's why it's 2/3 votes. If if 2/3 of the council members going to vote for it and the administrator think it's essential that we move forward on it, with that not being able to move forward.
I understand what you're saying. Maybe we could somehow revisit the language in here so that it tightens up when it can be used.
Now, I'm okay with that, yeah, but I just don't want to be absolutely that it, it just, we can't deal with it, but maybe something.
And I agree, there are things that will come up last minute that there was no other opportunity to get it addressed, and it is something. For example, last meeting tonight, and if we're not meeting again until the end of August, then we need to do something. So, Mr. Farah, I saw you, I think, wanted to speak. If you could, did you want to add into that, and then I'll get Ms. Newton?
Yes, sir. So when I kind of took a look at this, kind of omnibus look at it, I got a little creative here, and this is one of the areas. This is not, there's arguments for and against this rule, and you have laid out the bad part of it, Mr. Malinowski, saying this is something that could be abused. But I think Mr. Livingston is hit kind of where I was headed, where, the FOIA kind of lays out the minimum of what you have to do as far as notice, and then council, has chosen to put in a process that is a little stricter as far as it doesn't really accommodate last minute things. So, like, for example, if a lawsuit came down Tuesday afternoon and we got a meeting that night, then obviously that's a time sensitive thing. So those things that are pop-ups, but it should not be intended to be abused. So that's the tension. So I think we can certainly look at the language, but this rule is only as good as council's willingness to kind of play by the spirit of it, which would be, hey, this is a no kidding exigent circumstance. It's the exception and not the rule.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate that. Maybe we can get language that would address it as such. Ms. Newton, I see you smirking there, Mr. Brown.
You have actually addressed my point, which was, could the language be tightened so that it corresponded with the spirit of what we're trying to do? I was going to also ask if our administrator, Mr. Brown, wanted to add some comments, but perhaps he's already contributed.
I'm paying attention to it now that you brought it to my attention. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. I want to give you an example of actually another route I've taken, and why I would have preferred to go with this route than a route that I took, but I'll give you a good example. So the Crossroads project that we dealt with back in, I believe it was around the February timeframe, because I was unable to get before the body, I went ahead and actually executed that agreement and came back to the body to try to have it ratified by the body, because I felt that the council needed to know about it, but we were on a tight deadline, and had we not executed that agreement, then we would have not received that funding that was paid for by the state, but rather we would have basically had to come up with those funds. So I'm certainly aware, I believe, of council's desire and my responsibility to make sure council is involved in those types of decisions. And I know you can't rely on me not to break your confidence. You need to put policies in place. But in that situation, I would have rather come to the body ahead of time rather than having to try to sign an agreement and then get the body to ratify it, because to me that creates other questions and other concerns. But you did ratify it, and it was a good reason, but I have those concerns myself. So I would want to be able to bring something to the body in advance rather than having to sign an agreement, make a judgment call, and then come back and have you ratify the decision and you feel uncomfortable with ratifying the decision. So that's all I had to add, Mr. Malinowski, just by way of it.
Thank you, Administrator Brown. Any other discussion on the 1.77?
Mr. Malinowski?
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that that's something that the attorney is going to come back to us with updated language on.
Yeah, I was just going
correct?
to add that we're going to keep that one there and wait for updated language. Okay. The next over to, it'd be after 1.77, you got C, we have order of the agenda. We need to add in there, and it's something that we're doing now. We even do it when we meet in person. Roll call isn't in there, and I think that needs to be the number one issue once we start the meeting. So if we could add that and then just back the other numbers up. And then my next question or comment is on number 6, C6, citizen input agenda items. That language, it says,
Mr. Mallon, what page you on?
we're working off of old ones because we keep the same
Okay.
old one. But here, let me try and find it.
But hold on.
It would be 13, bottom of page 13, Mr. Livingston. Agenda items,
Okay.
you got it?
No, yeah, go ahead on. I'll find it.
13 out of 100 is what this agenda is. If you got something that doesn't say
Yeah, I
that.
got it.
Okay,
I got it.
okay, down at the bottom, agenda items. It says input, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 9th line down, input must pertain to items on the agenda for which no public hearing is required. It says, or has been scheduled. Should we say is required or will be required? I don't know. Because we may know a public hearing is coming up and it hasn't been scheduled.
True.
So that's why I don't know if we should say which no public hearing is required, will be required. That means that there may be one coming up, like zoning public hearings. We know they all have a public hearing aspect to it. Mr. Farrar, if you could just look at that and see if that's something that maybe it says what I'm trying to say in there. If you could just, you don't have to answer now, take a look at it.
Okay, yes, sir.
And then the line that follows immediately after, individual members of council shall not be referred to by name. I've never understood why that can't be. I can understand you can't do derogatory name calling of council members, but if somebody comes in and says, I'd really like to give commendation to Councilwoman Newton for the fine job she did on A, B, and C items in my district. And had she had the support of Chairman Livingston, it would have gone a lot easier. See, we don't want to hear the negative if somebody gives it, but we're willing to hear the positive. And I think just referring to somebody by name, there's nothing wrong with it. Like when the people come forward and they say, my name is Joe Schmo, and Mr. Malinowski is my council representative. Well, you referred to me by name. According to this, it's against the rules. I think as long as it's in good taste, there is not a problem with referring to a council member by name. I mean, that's been on the books for a long time, and I've always personally thought it should have been eliminated. Thoughts from anyone?
Certainly, Mr. Malinowski, I think that the intent is as you stated, which is that I'm presuming it's to stop derogatory comments, particularly as you never know what someone's going to say on live TV. But to your point in terms of something being derogatory, I think that's the intent. But again, sometimes you don't know where those sentences are going to end up, no matter how they start.
You don't. And I think that there's not a problem because so many times I've heard, and not just Chairman Livingston, but other chairs, when somebody says a name, they right away say, you can't address council members by name. We asked for your name. I don't see it as a problem. I'd like to see that eliminated or at least tweaked to the point when it's where it would say individual members of council shall not be referred to in a derogatory manner. That's what I'd like to see.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I think also, Mr. Malinowski, from a process perspective, we also have the opportunity for the clerk to council to when people have signed up to speak, or I guess perhaps the vice chair in that circumstance, to remind people of the rules before we start, so they have an opportunity to say, remember, give your name, etc. And you're not allowed to make derogatory comments to a council member.
Good idea. We could even get that in there somewhere under vice chair duties, chair and or vice chair duties. Continuing on in that same paragraph where it says any material that a speaker would like to present to council, including audio and visual presentations, should be provided to the clerk of council, right? Yeah, prior to the meeting. I don't think we tell the people that. And I don't know how we tell it, if we need to. They don't see this rule. They don't know it. They don't know that I'm coming in with a list of 500 names I want to show you. You know, a petition. Can we put that somehow on that citizens input page, or is it starting to get too cluttered up by doing that? That if you have information you want council to see, please provide it to the clerk. Because right now people come over to the end position, which I happen to be in right now, and they put it up there and say, will you pass these down, please? Well, that's sort of disruptive during the meeting, and it takes away from people really listening totally to what this person wants to say now, because they're scanning through these papers they just sent down.
Mr. Malinowski?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess to my previous point, to me, there's some things that would be enshrined in rules, and then there's some things that would be custom and practice. And so there are several items in our rules that someone from the public would want to know, but wouldn't find here. For example, what is the deadline to submit a presentation that you're going to share at council before the meeting? What are the rules? And so this seems like it's also a case where, presuming we go back to in-person meetings, on our sign-up sheet, we can also have it written there. Any materials have to be provided in advance, but we could put it on our website. And also, we need to find a way to pull out the public-facing information of this and to share it so that people know what to expect when you come to a county council meeting.
And I think, as you said on the previous one about the vice chair mentioning to, and no derogatory name calling in there, the vice chair could also say, anyone that has signed up to speak during the citizens input section, if you have information you would like the council to see, please provide it to our clerk before you speak or after you speak. But don't go giving it to the council. Mr. Livingston?
And we may come up with something to the effect of, you know, the rules for council meetings and just go through our rules and say, here's what the public needs to know reference council meetings or something of that nature, so the public will know.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say, Mr. Livingston. So thank you for clarifying.
I understood that. All right, on the next page, continuing with the agenda items where it says council prior to the meeting, exceptions may be made with a consent of a simple majority of those members present. It's struck through, the chair will request that in the event a citizen who has signed up to speak intends to speak or does speak on behalf of any group, association, community, in addition to themselves, that the speaker advise council during his or her citizen input of the fact and name or identify anyone else for whom the citizen is speaking or represents. That has been struck out. But people all the time come up, and one of the ones is, I forget her name right now, but from the Conservation Commission. My name's so-and-so.
Kara?
Kosowski. Yeah, my name's Carol Kosowski. And I'm representing the Conservation Committee, and I'm representing the Gills Creek Watershed Committee, and I'm representing my neighborhood that's nearby there. Well, wait a minute. How do I know you really represent all those folks? Did you come in with a signed document from all these people? How do I know you're on this other commission or committee? So I would like to, in place of that struck out one, say that, and again, this would go to what you, Ms. Newton, and you, Mr. Livingston, said as far as these little rules that people need to know. that speakers are advised they can only represent themselves during their input, because we have, as a council, no way of knowing if they represent anyone else or not. It's just their words saying it. I belong to the ABC Homeowners Association, and 300 people have sent me here to speak on their behalf. Well, have they? So that's why I think that needs to also be put in there in that part, that the vice chair will advise speakers that they only represent themselves when they speak. Unless somebody sees a problem with that.
I gotta think about it, because I don't know, someone might have permission to speak on behalf of another group.
But remember, we've had times when people will say, can I give
No, I'm talking within 2
my
minutes.
2 minutes? You
I'm
know,
talking within 2 minutes, and they want to speak on behalf of a group.
yeah. Think about that one and see what
Yeah.
you do.
Now, I'm not talking about extending the time. I'm talking about
Yeah.
Right.
speak on behalf of a group within 2
Yeah,
minutes.
about representing a group.
Yeah.
Sure, because in the case of Carol Kosowski, for example, she is the chair of the Richmond County Conservation
I know
Commission.
that. I know
and
that. Yeah. But I just used her for the example because she's got a half a dozen hats she puts on at any given meeting.
Sure. Or when the mayor of Irmo came to talk to us, he was representing Irmo. So,
Right.
okay.
Well, he was the mayor, but I'm going to, for example, the homeowners associations. There may be 50 homes in that association, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't have a meeting. I don't know. Was there a vote taken that said yes or no to what you're down there speaking on? I don't know. So I really don't like when people come in and say, I represent this HOA of 50 members. Well, maybe only 20 of them are supporting what you're saying, even though you're the president of that HOA. I don't know. Think about that one. Non-agenda items, B, right below it, input. Same comment there about with the public hearing as you go part way through, that public hearing is required, will be required, or has been scheduled. If we could add the will be required. And the same comment with individual members of council shall not be referred to by name. And the same comment about providing information to the clerk where it says should be provided. And that's throughout. If we're going to address it one time, we'll just be consistent through and do whatever it's decided that we should do.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
So just, Mr. Farah, when you were reviewing that language, I just would like to highlight again about the speaking in public hearings, that the zoning public hearing is actually a very good use case, because we have that happen often where conceivably you could come and you could speak at every single meeting about something that we don't have a public hearing scheduled for, but you know that we will in fact have a public hearing because that is how the zoning process works. So I think that's just a really good, in addition to whatever regular examples, I think that's a particularly good test case. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. My next comment goes down to number 8, where it says report of the clerk of council, and it says the clerk of council shall make announcements, if any, concerning county affairs. In the event the clerk recommends or requests an item for action during this section of the agenda, the administrator may nominate the same for action in accordance with Rule 1.7b. You see, here we go. Now we're expanding it even further. Now we're saying, all right, if the clerk wants something thrown in here, we'll let the administrator get it on under his 1.7b. And then down below in the next one, number 9. Now we got the chair can recommend to the administrator to do the same thing. I think we're starting to get too far away from what the intent of that new proposed rule is, because really, if the clerk can do it and the chair can do it, any council member can do it. So how far do we go? I don't think we need to include these here. I think we need to tighten up the original Rule 1.7 with what the intent of it is. And if there is something that needs to be done, that's where it gets taken care of. And we don't need number 8 or number 9 here. Those are my thoughts. Ms. Newton,
Mr. Chair.
yes.
My question would be, I don't disagree. I guess I would wonder if hearing that, I know that Mr. Farah added some of these items after reviewing our meetings and looking at what some of the pain points are. So I guess I would wonder if you have any comments that you would like to add in addition to what Mr. Malinowski said, or if you are also thinking that tightening up the rule 1.7 would be the best way to move forward. 1.77. I don't know if you're with us, Mr. Farah.
His phone's down there, but he may be doing.
Well, we can.
So there he goes.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I was muted for a second there, sorry. Yeah, I can tell you the rationale for why I put that language in there was because when I looked at the agenda, those were the officials who had a dedicated report on the agenda. So it wouldn't, the intent would not be for just anybody to come along and throw something on there. And this also, the intent would be that those type of action items should already be on the agenda. But if this is one of these, hey, the clerk had some last minute deal and didn't make it, this would be a kind of a vehicle for that. But I do think if we kind of get 1.7 B, or what was it, 1.7 C7, anywhere that initial rule for the administrator tightened up, it could address 8 and 9 as well.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
In number 10, about halfway down under the very first red line section, where it's crossed out saying in no more than 1 page in length and should be timely submitted in advance of the agenda deadline for the meeting. I think in that one, we need to be specific. I think right now it says 2 weeks prior to the agenda deadline. So we don't need to, in here, change it. It says in advance of the agenda deadline. I think it needs to specifically state what the rule is, that in advance of the agenda deadline, which is 2 weeks prior to that deadline. So I'd like to see the specific put in there, not just leave it somewhat arbitrary. And next page, any material that a speaker intends to present. That's the same thing with, we got to think about, do we allow them to take credit for representing others or not? The next paragraph under the red section, again about council members not being referred to by name. As I said, I'm not going to bring these up every time because I did it in the beginning, but it's there. We need to do something with the first one it's done with. We can follow through and do it for all of them. I'm down to number 15 if nobody had anything prior to that. It says about requests by council members, items may include those that were defeated or deferred beyond 90 days by committee and reintroduced by 3 members of council. It doesn't say here how it needs to be introduced by 3 members of council. I think we need to state something substantive to show that how the requests were made other than verbal, so we've got a paper trail to go back to if it's questioned by anybody in the public. Email, that's fine.
Mr. Malinowski.
Text, yes.
That actually is one of our rules. I don't know where it is, but there is a rule
but over here,
that the 3 members have to do it in writing.
This is it. This is what they've changed. It says reintroduce, it's number 15, reintroduced by 3 members of council, and it says member signatures has been struck through. I think we need.
I guess I thought there was another rule.
And there may be, I'd have to go through and look. But even as we're moving, if that other rule is in here toward that rule, I believe we need something substantive to show the requests were made. Not just the clerk says, oh yeah, 3 of them called me up. When? I don't know, last week sometime.
All right, so
Well,
just.
Go ahead, Mr. Farah.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, I would just say that we could probably do that by three members of council by written submission to the, would it be the clerk, or you want, by the deadline, or, do you want that to go through the chair, or how do you want to do that?
It always had been the clerk previously.
Okay, so if that's an agreed upon rule, then that would just be kind of processing at that point. So three members of council by written submission to the clerk in advance of deadline.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. That's easy.
Okay. The one item that we have, then we go 15, we go to 16. We left out the one that we always have in our meetings after 16 and the second county attorney's report for executive session. The other items, we got to add the other back in there. It's not in here. And then number 17. Let me go. I made a note to go to page 59. Let me see what's there on my old ones. The number 17. So that the nature of the motion appears on the agenda, or the ordinance may be sent forward for second reading. Further, any council member may use this to inform council administration and county staff of upcoming matters or items likely to come before council. I think that would go under the other part, the one about any council member may use this time to inform council, administration, and county staff of upcoming matters or items likely to come before council, so that they can become oriented and request information or the commencement of research. I don't know, it just seems that that's not, it doesn't say it's a motion. I just don't know.
Yeah, I think when I looked at that, I think the title of it was motion period / announcements, and I don't know that we really get a lot of announcements at that, because usually it's the end of the meeting and just a few motions get kind of divvied up to the committees. But I think, that's just kind of a throw in to basically say, if you know you've got something coming up, rather than have to wait for a committee direction, if it's like, hey, can you guys start looking? Because, y'all don't really need to make a motion and tell your lawyer to start looking at something. We'd be happy to research it, just to kind of the direction. And that again, it's just, it's something that unties your hands in terms of, it's not an action by any stretch, but it's kind of orienting us, because I would hate for you to say, well, we could have told you about this 3 weeks ago. She could have gotten ready, but our rules didn't allow it. And that's just kind of what that's for.
Okay. Up in the part where it says after the parentheses, 24 hours prior to such meeting, so that the nature of the motion appears on the agenda. We've got many times where a motion comes in 24 hours ahead of time. And right now, because the agenda's already been printed up, rather than go back to the old system of tearing down more trees to create more paper and send an amended agenda because of a 2-sentence motion, it's just printed on one piece of paper and put in front of everyone on the dais. Or in this case, when that meeting, it would be sent by an email. So I think that maybe somehow we need to indicate that in there, because if somebody's looking at the agenda from the outside, they say, well, that motion's not here. How can they do that? I just think we need to explain that it will appear on the agenda, however, motions received once the agenda has been printed and distributed will, as long as they're within the FOIA requirements, will be handed out individually. Does that sound all right, Mr. Farrell?
Yes, sir, that's fine.
Okay.
Mr. Malinowski.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair. So thank you, because I have a question here on my document that didn't make sense to me until you said that. So in terms of some of those motions that are submitted late, Mr. Farah, and this is probably maybe a process question more than a rules question, but I would love to see those posted. I don't think we need to kill more trees and print 355 pages for the addition of 2 sentences, but is it just a process issue where we post it on our website with the other agendas, or do you have some other suggestion, because if not, what happens is that somebody who diligently waited 7 hours until the motion period has no idea what we're talking about because they can't see the motion. So I guess I'm just looking for suggestions.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, this really isn't a FOIA piece as much because you're not taking any action on the motion. You're basically routing it to the committee. So
Gotcha.
really, this could be posted on the website or outside the meeting room at any time. I mean, even during the meeting, as long because I get the point. Somebody needs to see. So you'd have the agenda posted that'd be 24 hours, but you could stick up the kind of untimely motions right on the spot at the start of the meeting. It still wouldn't be a FOIA problem.
I think we should call them that in the future, the untimely motions.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Following that portion right there, the next paragraph, when referring an item to committee, a council member must specify the intent of his or her motion. The council member may request, among other things. Well, that sure seems to leave it wide open to interpretation. What are among other things? Do we really need that statement in there? The council member may request an item be referred to committee for, and when they're in committee, really, we only have certain things we do and they're listed there. Is there any need?
Yeah, I think that's probably a holdover from, because if it's in black, not font and not red, that's probably a holdover from the original, so I don't know why that's there.
It is, so if we could get rid of that one, if everybody's in agreement with that. Then on the next page.
So, pardon me, Mr.
Yes.
Malinowski.
Yes.
So to clarify then, this part of the rules would stop at the word motion period, specify the intent of his or her motion, and then the other items are struck?
No, then we keep, the council
until
member may request that an item be referred to committee for, and they list those items it could go there for.
I'm going to have to leave, y'all. Hate to do that, but.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. We're not going to get much more done. We got 8 minutes. Enjoy your ED meeting. Did you get that, Ms. Newton?
I did. I guess I wonder, to your point, since we can only refer items to committees for certain actions, if we need items A through D at all.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because I think when we actually get to the committee portion of the rules, it says what can be done in those committees. Mr. Farah?
So I'm flexible either way.
Yeah, I think so. That was the language that was originally in the rules, and so I really shortened it to say here's all the possibilities you could have for sending something to committee, but that's not a problem if y'all want to strike that.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Newton. Says when referring an item to committee, a council member must specify the intent of his or her motion and end it there. Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Okay.
That's good.
Okay. On the next page, under pending items. Issues that have been raised, number 18, issues that have been raised by a council member wherein a response is expected from staff shall be listed on the agenda along with a time frame in which a response from staff will be provided. These items shall be for information only, and no discussion shall take place. Why do we eliminate that portion? Because if it is for information only, I think no discussion should take place. So why don't we keep that ending part in there?
Yeah, that's we certainly can. So just input and no discussion shall take place. Period or
period. Right.
Yeah. Because I think when I said information only, that's what I was saying is that we wouldn't be discussing it. But yeah, if we just leave that in there, that clarifies it a little bit.
Right.
Okay. We just and no discussion shall take place. Period.
Right. Okay. You all right with that, Ms. Newton?
I guess I'm okay with that as long as we really abide by the second part of the sentence that says this is the time frame when a response will be provided, because as far as I can recall, most of the discussion around these types of items revolves around when someone's coming back to us and what they're coming back to us with. So as long as those questions can be answered, I'm okay. But otherwise, I do think we need the ability to clarify why this is on our agenda for information.
And I agree with you. Let's just make sure, Administrator Brown, that when staff gives some response, that a time frame is put in there then. Okay, adjourn additions. Okay, I guess everything's okay there. Let me see here. We got a question here from Mr. Manning on that one, which is page 60. Well, my page 60, not yours. It goes over to after. Oh yeah, okay. This is Mr. Manning has a question on this one, on that red line.
What is this one?
Additions D19 and then
okay.
D additions.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Manning's question says, why here is 2/3 vote of the members present, and earlier references like censorship, 2/3 vote is 8 members, i.e. 2/3 of the full body, not those present. And I agree with them, for consistency's sake, it should be 2/3 of those present throughout, not just 2/3 vote is 8 members.
Yeah, the reason for that in this one is this, because that's the verbatim language from the statute. So the 34-80 actually requires 2/3 vote of the members present and voting. Yeah, so that's a statutory requirement. The other one is probably more policy decisions, because I don't know the source of the 2/3 language of the previous rules. They probably was just a policy call of council, but this is actually statutory, so that's probably the difference.
He did not tell me where where it says, well, wherever censorship appears, he said 2/3 vote is 8 members. I think we just need to be consistent with the statement of 2/3 vote of the members present when we're going back and rewriting this. Is that fine?
I think this.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Newton.
No, I'll let Mr. Farah address it. He might make my point.
Okay.
Oh no, I think the censorship, because that's probably a new rule. I'm pretty sure I added that one. So when we talk about 2/3, there's 2 ways you can do a quorum, and I don't want to get into this too much because it's lengthy. But you can do 2/3 of the members present, or 2/3 of the member, or whatever you want to do, 2/3, 3/4, whatever of the members present, or of the members of the whole. When you talk about the members of the whole, so the other day there was an issue about council. Is 2/3, is that the number of people present? So say you had 9 members, that'd be 6, or is it 2/3 of the member of the whole, which 11 is a goofy number, so that would be 8, would be 2/3. So that's the difference.
I see where he's referring to. It's your proposed new rule 2.4 censor. In the second paragraph, it says requires a 2/3 vote of the full council, i.e. at least 8 of the 11, whether council has been seated or not, must vote to censor a member. That's where he's referring to.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty drastic thing to censor somebody. So I think that's why I recommend it. And again, it could be whatever council. It could be a simple majority if you want, but if you had 2/3 of the members present, I mean, you could have dwindled down to 7, 8 members and get 2/3 of that, and actually censor one of your colleagues and have 3 or 4 members not even be present for that. So that's a pretty drastic thing to censor somebody. So that was the rationale for that.
Okay, I can understand that now. Ms. Newton? Quickly, we got a minute left.
He made my point. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm fine with that, and we can explain that, that being the reason, Mr. Farah. Thank you for that info. All right, the fact that we are out of time, let's start when we come back. If there's no questions or comments on Rule 2, the chair, through transgression of 2.1, 2, or 2.3, we'll start the next one at 2.4 with a proposed new rule for censor. Is that fine?
works for me.
Okay. Well, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Miss Only, if you'll, we got to take the motion first.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Mr. Malinowski,
Yes.
Kennedy, Newton.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Motion
Brown,
passes.
Ms. Powell,
you.
Ms. Myers, and Mr. Farah for attending this meeting.